Hey, what's up? Tabitha escapes the town that is impossible to leave with Victor's help and wakes up in a hospital in Maine, where the sight of bustling streets confirms her return to the real world. The doctor calls the police due to her lack of identification, but the mistrust acquired after years of survival makes her flee immediately. While walking among the cars, she spots the boy who pushed her from the lighthouse, but he disappears before she can question him about how to rescue her family. Confused and without resources, she realizes that the fight to save those left behind is just beginning. In the town, Sheriff Boyd deals with the physical consequences of having broken the curse and faces a supply crisis after a storm destroys the crops. The Matthews family is collapsing with Ethan crying and Julie traumatized, leading Jim to decide to enter the forest to look for Tab. Despite warnings about the dangers, the deputy volunteers to accompany him, arguing that Jim cannot leave his children orphans. Before they leave, they need to restrain Jade, who snapped and was breaking belongings while obsessively studying strange symbols he believes are the key to the exit. After the duo departs, Boyd discovers that the remaining vegetables have rotted and rushes to the diner, where panic has taken over the starving residents. Victor draws a gun to stop the crowd from killing the farm cattle, and Boyd intervenes to disarm him and explain the importance of the animals for long-term survival. With no immediate planting options due to the poisoned soil, they devise a risky plan, but tension remains high. Elgin has a nightmare about a woman drowning him, proving that the location's evil influence remains strong over all of them. Jim and the deputy walk all day without finding the tower, seeing only bizarre statues, and decide to spend the night in a cabin protected by talismans. Meanwhile, night falls in the town, and the humanoid monsters execute a cruel strategy, opening the pens to release the cattle and condemn the residents to starvation. Jade and Boyd notice the movement and run to the streets. Randall uses the bus to light up the area and help rescue residents, including Ethan and Julie, who narrowly escape a creature that invaded their home. The chaos spreads as residents try to recover the frightened animals amidst the infested darkness. Boyd and the deputy's mother manage to lead a group of cows to the barn and lock the door, believing they are safe with the talisman positioned. However, the monsters were already inside waiting for them. Boyd is immobilized and forced to watch helplessly as the creatures brutally torture and kill the woman, ignoring her screams and amusing themselves with her suffering. Unaware of the massacre, Jim realizes in the cabin that the forest is too dangerous and decides to return to take care of his children, temporarily giving up the search. In the real world, Tabitha gets a phone and calls her mother, discovering that her family has been missing for over a year, which confirms the time distortion. She hangs up without explaining, remembering she needs to find a solution alone. Lost and seeking direction, she enters a church where a brief conversation with the priest inspires her to check the items she brought with her. Tabitha opens the metal lunchbox Victor gave her before the escape and finds an address written on the bottom along with some dry rations. Determined to follow this lead, she goes to the indicated location and finds an elderly man. The man is visibly shaken to recognize the old lunchbox in her hands and asks with a trembling voice where she got it. In that instant, Tabitha realizes the stranger in front of her is Victor's father. Fortunately, the residents' quick action recovers a significant part of the cattle and sheep, ensuring food for the town for another month. Jade arrives at the barn and finds the sheriff kneeling beside the diner owner's body, mourning the loss. After composing themselves, they take the body to the church, where the sheriff reflects on the cruelty of the monsters, whose goal is not just to kill, but to inflict terror and psychological despair on the survivors. Donna confronts the sheriff, arguing that this death is an irreparable loss despite the saved cattle. She warns that recent events prove the town is being manipulated. The suggestion that the monsters used the animals as bait to increase suffering shakes the sheriff, who hadn't considered this sadistic strategy. Victor, disturbed by the situation, declares that everyone is doomed and leaves furiously, refusing to accept false hopes of survival in that cursed place. In the forest, the deputy discovers that Jim found a vegetable patch near the lake sufficient to feed the town for months. They return triumphant, but find the residents in mourning and with somber expressions. The deputy runs to the diner and realizes his mother isn't there, forced to face the reality of her death just as happened with his father. Christy promises to prepare the body so he can say goodbye without the visual trauma, but the cheerful music suddenly playing on the radio enrages him, leading him to destroy the device. The sheriff finds the deputy preparing to burn down the monster's cave in an act of revenge. He decides to accompany him to the entrance, but hesitates upon realizing that this impulsive reaction might be exactly what the creatures want. The deputy confesses that the image of terror on his mother's face haunts him, but the sheriff reveals she died with courage, repeating a phrase in another language asking him to take care of her son. Upon learning that his mother's last thought was his safety, the deputy gives up the plan, realizing he doesn't have the right to throw his life away. Christy, with the help of Jade and Sarah, prepares the diner owner's body with a dress she was saving to use if she ever left the town. The care and the preparation transforms her appearance, allowing for a dignified wake in the church, where the sheriff vows her death won't be in vain. After the ceremony, he recruits his son for a plan to capture the monsters, ignoring the reluctance of the young man who is worried about Fatima's pregnancy. Fatima suffers from severe morning sickness and begins losing teeth, being diagnosed with severe malnutrition by the medical assistant, as she hasn't been able to eat for days. Desperate and starving, she finds rotten vegetables being discarded, and surprisingly, the smell pleases her. Hiding in a corner, she compulsively devours the spoiled food, relieving her hunger, but without knowing the consequences this bizarre diet will have on the baby she carries. In the real world, Tabitha confronts Victor's father, who initially calls her a liar and calls the police, refusing to believe her story about the town and the monsters. However, when she mentions Victor's wish to save the children trapped in the tower, the old man's attitude changes drastically. He reveals that before disappearing at age 6, Victor and his mother heard voices of children asking for help from a tower, connecting past events with Tabitha's account. Victor's father takes Tabitha to the basement and shows drawings made by his late wife depicting scenes identical to those of the cursed town. He explains that his wife believed she was one of the chosen ones to save those trapped in these places, a mission that now seems to have passed to Tabitha. Meanwhile in the town, Jim answers the phone and hears his deceased son's voice. The deputy leads a group to collect the vegetables in the forest, planning to spend the night in the nearby cabin due to the distance. Jade, obsessed with finding an exit, hallucinates figures trapped in trees and demands to return to town. Considering the stay in the forest dangerous, Christy tries to stop him from going out alone in the dark, but ends up stepping on a rusty bear trap that painfully pins her leg. The deputy and Jade try to free Christy, but the lock is jammed and night is approaching fast. Bringing the risk of a monster attack, Jade rips a metal rod from a scarecrow to use as a lever, and with joint effort, they manage to open the trap. With Christy's leg broken and unable to walk, the group is forced to remain in the cabin, vulnerable in the darkness of the forest. Meanwhile, Jim receives a new mocking call, using his dead son's voice, warning him to check on his other children who are playing outside. Jim runs desperately out of the house and finds the sheriff ringing the alert bell, signaling that residents must take shelter before nightfall. To his relief, Julie and Ethan are found safe at a nearby farm. But upon bringing them back, Jim feels a deep unease, as if the entity controlling the town is toying with him again, and his anger grows when the children retreat in frustration. The phone rings one more time with that disturbing sound, making Jim slam the receiver onto the hook in fury. Victor learns about the brutal death of the diner owner, and the news shakes him so much that he considers fleeing, but decides to act by digging in the forest to recover an old tattered suitcase. He seeks out Sarah, declaring that a catastrophe is approaching and that they need to build a safe shelter immediately. Meanwhile, at Colony House, Fatima, with her pregnancy advanced, is overcome by nausea when looking at normal food and sneaks off to eat spoiled vegetables with bizarre satisfaction, being watched in shock by an elderly lady. The woman knocks on Fatima's door moments later, trying to reassure her that strange events are expected in that situation. Fatima, with tears in her eyes, confesses her fear of being pregnant with a monster due to the town's supernatural nature. To relieve the tension, the lady proposes a tarot reading, confident in her abilities. However, as soon as the cards are drawn, the session is interrupted when a crow hits the window. The attempt to maintain composure fails when a second bird collides against the wall and dies on impact, confirming that something evil hangs over the house. At the station, the tension motivates Sheriff Boyd to formulate a risky plan to capture a humanoid monster alive, aiming to extract information that the previous dissection did not reveal. Ellis opposes, reminding him that the study of the corpse brought no answers. Donna also intervenes upon hearing the discussion, warning about the extreme danger, recounting how the creatures are intelligent and immune to shotgun blasts. She insists that Boyd shouldn't risk his life and that Ellis should focus on protecting his family. But the sheriff, although shaken, decides he will go alone if necessary. While planning the trap, Boyd begins to hallucinate the deceased priest who appears in his mind to mock his strategy. The vision ridicules the idea of luring a monster into a house, trapping it with talismans, and waiting for dawn, suggesting that the creatures will only destroy his confidence. Once again, Randall hallucinates a swarm of cicadas invading the bus until he is brought back to reality by Boyd's shouts. The sheriff proposes switching places with Randall for the night, believing the bus offers the ideal position to observe the enemy's movements in the real world. Tabitha convinces Victor's father to help her investigate the town's mysteries, believing the boy in white is the key to everything. Upon seeing a tree in his backyard decorated with glass bottles identical to those in the town, she stands paralyzed. The man explains it was his late wife's work, and takes her to see a larger installation in a park. During the drive, a song from the town plays on the radio, and she finds in the glove compartment the same bracelet she made for her husband before they disappeared. Convinced she is still trapped in the illusion, Tabitha panics, concluding that this is not the real world. Victor's father, confused, dismisses her theories as madness, and the argument results in an accident when another car collides with theirs, causing the vehicle to flip. Tabitha wakes up in an ambulance, being recognized by the police as the fugitive from the hospital. While she tries to formulate an excuse, the ambulance stops abruptly in front of a fallen tree blocking the road. Tabitha observes the landscape with disbelief, recognizing the ominous crows that indicate her return to the cursed town, feeling her heart sink while the officer ignores her warnings as mere coincidence. Simultaneously at the family home, Ethan answers a phone call from his deceased brother, warning about the mortal danger surrounding his mother trapped in the ambulance. Jim destroys the phone in a fit of rage, but they realize the device was working without being connected to power, which motivates Ethan to insist on an immediate rescue mission. As the ambulance gets lost, confirming Tabitha's worst fears, Sheriff Boyd and Randall wait in the bus, armed with the confidence of those who have memorized the creature's nocturnal habits. The ambulance headlights cut through the darkness, bringing Tabitha back to the nightmare and causing Ethan to run to meet her. Boyd acts quickly, intercepting the boy and taking him to the safety of the house, deducing that this unexpected arrival, added to recent events with the cattle, is yet another trap calculated by the monsters. Inside the ambulance, the sense of error is palpable when the medical team ignores Tabitha's protests and decides to investigate a woman fallen on the road, prioritizing professional duty over survival. The supposed victim smiles grimly and attacks, massacring the paramedics while the officer, whose shots prove useless, is forced to retreat. Jim, hearing the chaos outside, runs to free his handcuffed wife, while fear consumes Tabitha, unable to wake Victor's father amidst the nearby howls. The rescue becomes a race against time when Tabitha's husband arrives, followed by the sheriff and Randall, but the lack of keys for the handcuffs requires an improvised solution. Randall runs to get tools but is suddenly surrounded by a cloud of insects and monsters, becoming isolated from any safe escape route. Trusting his talisman, he throws the toolbox to Boyd, who faces a dilemma. The monster displays the vehicle keys with scorn, forcing the sheriff to abandon Randall to save the couple. At Colony House, the fleeing officer fires blindly at her pursuers, accidentally hitting a resident who had come out to observe the confusion. The medical assistant, who was attending to Fatima earlier, takes charge to try to save the victim, ordering them to take her inside. Donna angrily allows the guilty officer inside, but the atmosphere remains heavy, barely having time to breathe before the sheriff's group arrives. Despite surgical efforts, the wounded resident succumbs to internal bleeding, unleashing Sheriff Boyd's fury against the officer's recklessness. Donna intervenes to prevent a greater tragedy, dragging the sheriff upstairs, where she finally breaks down under the weight of leadership, crying uncontrollably and cursing the endless torment. Meanwhile, downstairs, Elgin experiences terror upon being confronted by a ghostly apparition that whispers pleas for help before vanishing into thin air. Far from the chaos, Victor seeks refuge at Sarah's house and begins unpacking a suitcase full of recovered relics, hoping the objects will awaken memories. He narrates the tragedy of his childhood, where only he survived a massacre thanks to the mysterious boy in white, and presents peculiar items like a clock that smells of onions. The absence of a specific doll makes him remember Christopher, a kind man who went mad after seeing strange symbols, suggesting a parallel with the obsessive behavior Jade has been demonstrating. In the cabin, Jade theorizes that unraveling the symbols is the key to escape until interrupted by knocking outside. Back at Colony House, Boyd brings in a bloodied Randall, left as a warning in the ambulance. While in a nearby room, Fatima, moved by her pregnancy cravings, takes advantage of a private moment to consume the blood of the recently deceased victim. Without hesitation, Sheriff Boyd drags Randall back inside. The man, although gravely injured with part of his face lacerated, has chances of survival thanks to the quick intervention. However, furious, Randall questions why he was abandoned to his fate. A heavy silence falls over the room with those present unable to answer, turning their gazes to the sheriff. The next morning, the deputy returns safely with supplies, but Boyd feels overwhelmed by the residents' fixation on Tabitha's return and calls a town meeting. Victor's father, staying at Colony House, shows unease with the reunion with his son and the house's precarious conditions. Victor, for his turn, plans to explore the tunnels in search of Christopher, and upon leaving, discovers there was another death the previous night. Before he can process the fact, Donna reveals his father's presence in town, which makes Victor flee in a state of shock. Tabitha reunites with her children and details her journey, from the bottle tree to waking up in the hospital. Jade appears, insisting that she holds the key to the escape and asks to be taken to the mysterious tree, believing the bottles contain clues. Jim is skeptical, warning about the portal's dangerous randomness, but Jade remains obstinate. Meanwhile, the deputy reports to Boyd about different creatures heard the previous night and a mysterious man sighted, reinforcing the sheriff's theory that the monsters are manipulating the town, including allowing Randall to survive to sow terror. At Colony House, Victor's father discovers that his son avoids seeing him and is moved to see his room preserved as a sanctuary of old memories. Donna leads him to the packed diner for the meeting, where Boyd tries to moderate expectations about Tabitha leading an escape. She recounts the outside world's disbelief regarding the town's existence. Far from being understanding, the residents attack her, accusing her of wasting the chance to save them, forcing her to withdraw. The sheriff tries to redirect focus to the hope that there is an exit, but is confronted by a resident who suggests simply following Tabitha's route to the tree. Fatima and Ellis support the idea, defying Boyd, who warns in vain about the mortal danger of random teleportation. The meeting ends in chaos and dissent. Disappointed with the opposition from his son and Fatima, Boyd leaves furiously, ignoring Ellis's attempted apologies. Jade persists in visiting the tree, and Tabitha, feeling guilty for not bringing solutions, agrees to guide him, promising Jim she won't enter the portal. At the station, the new officer tries to redeem herself, suggesting strategies to occupy the residence, but Boyd, still angry about the accidental shooting the previous night, kicks her out. At Colony House, Ellis discovers Fatima eating rotten food, and she confesses in despair that her urgency to flee is due to something deeply wrong with her pregnancy. In the abandoned parking lot, Sarah comforts Victor, helping him process the family reunion and his father's pain of loneliness. Nearby, Ethan talks to Victor's father, serving as a bridge between the generations. Victor emerges from the forest and embraces his father in a silent and emotionally charged reunion. At the bottle tree, Jade and Tabitha examine the meaningless numbers on the papers, with Jade convinced they are pieces of a larger puzzle linked to the symbols he studies. The investigation is interrupted by a reckless resident who, ignoring the warnings, throws himself into the tree's portal. He is teleported inside a concrete wall of a dry pool, suffering a horrific death in front of everyone. Sheriff Boyd arrives in time to witness the man's end, prevented even from offering a mercy shot before he succumbs. Taking advantage of the shock of the scene, Boyd confronts the crowd, shouting that every reckless attempt charges its price in blood. The residents' arrogance dissolves before the brutality of death, leaving only the silence of fear. Until Donna, the first to recover, starts to react. Donna dedicates herself to building a makeshift grave for the deceased man, seeking to offer a dignified rest. The deputy arrives to help with the task and, recognizing the woman's strength in caring for the community, confesses that the loneliness in his old house, full of constant memories of his dead parents, has become unbearable and requests permission to move into Colony House, seeking the comfort of proximity to other survivors to maintain his sanity. Meanwhile, Victor and his father go through a difficult reconciliation, with the son maintaining a cold stance and focused on his exploration mission. The father, refusing to allow Victor to face the dangers alone again, insists on accompanying him to the cave entrance. Victor, moved by the memory of a doll he believes contains vital secrets about the place, leads the way with a flashlight, warning his father that absolute silence is the only guarantee of survival in the darkness. The pair advances through the tunnels, with Victor placing figurines strategically to mark the escape route, noting the unusual absence of the monsters that used to sleep there. Despite the growing anxiety of the father who begs at every step for them to return to safety, Victor persists in the investigation until his markers run out, squeezing through a narrow crack in the rock. They finally emerge in a spacious chamber, full of discarded objects, where the true danger waits. Victor locates the specific doll he was looking for among the debris, also noticing the presence of several sleeping creatures in a corner. The operation is suddenly compromised when the father, overcome with emotion upon finding his late wife's scarf among the lost belongings, makes an accidental noise that wakes the monsters. Adrenaline takes control and both flee desperately through the tunnels, managing to narrowly escape the creature's claws and reach the surface before being caught. Taking refuge in the abandoned train car, which serves as a temporary shelter for Victor, he examines the recovered doll, hopeful that the object is the necessary trigger to recover crucial memories. Meanwhile, Jade advances his investigation after collecting the papers from the bottles hanging on the portal tree, discovering complex numerical sequences in each one. Based on Tabitha's accounts, he begins to theorize that the portal acts as a spatial rift or wormhole capable of being mapped. Although Boyd maintains his skepticism regarding scientific explanations for the town's supernatural nature, he provides a valuable clue about a second tree he found in the past, marked with the date 1864. Jade's enthusiasm is renewed upon finding the same date in his current papers, confirming a connection. Guided by the sheriff, he locates this second tree, which, although devoid of an active portal, is adorned with similar bottles, and starts collecting the new clues, while ignoring the mocking hallucinations of the former bartender. While Jade works, Tabitha faces her own terror at home upon being cornered by pale, ghostly figures upstairs. Ethan's intervention makes the apparitions disappear, and Tabitha, still shaken, takes her son to Jade's house to report what happened. Coincidentally, Jade discovers a pattern of inverted numbers on the papers from the two trees, believing this anomaly in the data might be the master key to deciphering the mystery surrounding the exit. Jade reassures Tabitha, suggesting that the ghosts she saw, just like the children sighted in the cave, are victims seeking help, echoing the visions Victor's mother had in the past. The connection deepens when Tabitha recognizes in Jade's notes a sketch of a statue with red stones she saw vividly in her childhood dreams. This confirms that she, just like Victor's mother, has a bond with the town much older than her arrival. The deputy, searching the newly arrived ambulance, discovers a functional ultrasound machine among the medications and informs Boyd. The sheriff, relieved to know Randall's physical recovery is going well at the clinic, remembers Fatima's pregnancy and decides to inform the couple about the new equipment available. He is unaware, however, of Ellis and Fatima's anguish, who live under tension due to her cravings for rotten food and the fear that the pregnancy is actually something monstrous. The couple's nervous reaction to the news of the ultrasound confuses the sheriff, but Ellis convinces Fatima that facing reality is the only option. Reluctantly, she agrees to take the exam. Upon leaving, she has an encounter with Elgin, who is obsessively photographing the residents to create a visual record on the wall. At the clinic, Randall wakes from his coma and receives news from the medical assistant that his wounds haven't become infected, and healing is progressing rapidly. However, upon requesting a mirror, any relief is replaced by deep bitterness. The sight of the grotesque scar that now deforms his face serves as a reminder of that night's brutality and the abandonment he suffered. At the clinic, Dr. Christie performs the ultrasound on Fatima and notes the absence of any fetus, suggesting the pregnancy might be a psychological manifestation. Fatima, feeling real and violent internal movements, refuses the diagnosis and flees in despair, while Ellis tries to handle the situation. At the same time, at Colony House, Elgin analyzes the photos he took and discovers a shadowy figure standing behind Fatima. The apparition manifests to him again, offering an exchange for salvation before disappearing and leaving Elgin with a new clue revealed by the camera itself. Guided by the images, he locates a hidden basement in a clearing and decides to investigate what is down there. Inside, besides barrels and dust, he finds an old wardrobe hiding a secret passage to a habitable chamber, yet forgotten in time. Upon lifting a cloth in the corner of the room, he discovers a desiccated corpse, at which moment the ghostly figure reappears before him. Meanwhile, at the forest cabin, Jim's harvesting routine is interrupted by the arrival of Tabitha and Jade. as she insists that the location's architecture and terrain correspond perfectly to her childhood nightmares. Although Jim fears for his wife's safety, Tabitha remains unyielding, feeling she needs to unravel the truth behind her memories to understand her role there. Upon observing 3 specific stones on the ground, she confirms the setting's familiarity, remembering hiding in exactly that spot in her dreams. Jade, skeptical of Jim's hesitations, insists that Tabitha must have missed vital details, arguing that her connection to the town and the fact she was chosen are fundamental pieces to lead the group out of that place. In the town, Julie finds Randall newly released from the hospital, and both seek a distraction in the emergency van, where he offers to teach her to drive. The moment of relaxation is abruptly interrupted when Randall starts hallucinating the cicadas that attacked him, thrashing against the air in panic. Ashamed, he flees into the forest, followed by Julie to a set of ancient ruins that seem strangely familiar. Despite her curiosity to explore the place, Randall, recovering his sense of danger, insists they must leave, dragging her away from that area. Frustration consumes Victor, who stares at the doll, unable to access blocked memories, rejecting his father's pleas for rest in the face of everyone's imminent death. Decided, he takes the object to Sarah's house, hoping the basement will awaken memories like before. Meanwhile, the officer confronts the deputy about the town's chaotic logic and, after the radio emits static, decides to recover her weapon. She invades Boyd's office, ransacking drawers and demanding her weaponry to seek answers, refusing to accept the passivity and adaptation suggested by the sheriff as a means of survival. Boyd refuses to return the loaded weapon, citing the risk represented by the officer's behavior, but ends up relenting by handing over the pistol without ammunition, daring her to prove she is ready. Meanwhile, Fatima returns to Colony House, rejecting food and projecting her anger onto Ellis. The uncertainty about the nature of her pregnancy divides the couple. If it's real, it's something monstrous and invisible to the ultrasound. If it's not, madness has overtaken her. To the other residents, the conclusion is that she succumbed to the location's common hallucinations, becoming yet another victim. After venting to the elderly lady, Ellis tries to maintain calm, but the situation worsens when Fatima feels violent contractions in her abdomen that are invisible externally. Desperate seeing his girlfriend's suffering, he runs to the clinic and steals antipsychotics, being intercepted by Dr. Christie and Boyd, who try to administer the medication. Frustrated and powerless, Ellis abandons the discussion, and his father Boyd begins questioning if his own complacency and lack of action aren't putting everyone at greater risk than he imagined. Fatima's compulsion overcomes reason, leading her back to the shed to consume rotten vegetables in secret, at which moment a sharp and unbearable pain hits her. The elderly lady, hearing the noise and noticing the crisis, enters to offer comfort, but the situation spirals out of control when Fatima, in an outbreak mixed with pain, grabs a pair of scissors that was within reach. When Ellis arrives at the scene, his girlfriend, totally out of her mind, has just brutally murdered the old woman. Ellis seeks out his father upon discovering what happened, leading Boyd to make a difficult decision: protect his daughter-in-law instead of applying the law. Fatima is hidden in a remote cabin, claiming to have been controlled by an external force during the murder. An explanation the sheriff accepts, but knows the town would reject. With a protection amulet installed, she is left there while Boyd returns to deal with the body and the inevitable crisis. The old woman's corpse is discovered at Colony House, and Elgin, attracted by the screams, captures the moment with his camera, which reveals another supernatural photo. The ghost woman in the kimono with a message. Elgin, transformed by his previous encounter in the basement, ignores the collective panic and invades the empty clinic to steal a collection kit. Guided by a photo showing a blood bag, he drains his own blood, triggering a new photographic clue while his connection to the entity deepens. Boyd faces the dilemma of keeping Fatima's secret while dealing with pressure from Ellis, who insists on the truth, fearing she will meet the same fate as Sarah, who was never forgiven by the town. Upon arriving at the crime scene, they find the officer already analyzing the scene and ruling out monster action. Donna joins them and proposes blaming Sarah to avoid the breakdown of order, ignoring her innocence in favor of a solution that maintains the community's fragile peace. Meanwhile, Sarah helps Victor recover memories, but progress is nil until Tabitha, frustrated with her own search in the forest, is called to help. Understanding Victor's mind, she guides him through a reenactment of his adventure in the tunnels, which unlocks a crucial memory from his childhood. A game of hide-and-seek that led him to the church basement, where he witnessed the doll's owner talking not to the object, but to the mysterious boy in white. At the church, Victor's memory becomes complete. The boy in white revealed that the town and its horrors originate from children sacrificed by parents who believed they were born of darkness. Only one adult maintained hope, and the collective energy of these children created the portal tree. The revelation that salvation requires passing through the tree tunnel, something Victor's mother believed before disappearing, makes him finally understand the boy in white's plea for her to save the children. Julie, unable to ignore the connection she feels with the ruins in the forest, recruits her brother Ethan to accompany her after Randall's refusal. Upon arriving at the location, she is mentally transported to a strange space, where the screams tormenting her cease, replaced by the vision of a chained old man. In the real world, her body goes into convulsions, leading Ethan to seek desperate help, while Julie's mind interacts with the prisoner, whose actions echo past events experienced by the sheriff. Julie's vision leads her to a dark cave where she hears Victor and Tabitha's voices, until being awakened by the deputy and the officer who rescue her. At the same time, Ellis returns to the cabin to prepare Fatima for a long exile, but she, resigned to her guilt, receives a visit from the ghost woman, and shortly after from Elgin, who tracked her through his photos, interrupting her solitude with obscure intentions. Tension explodes between Boyd and Donna regarding Fatima's fate. Donna, realizing the truth, demands the murderer be imprisoned in the box to maintain order, arguing that the sheriff's authority is no longer enough to protect her, as he did with Sarah. Without options, Boyd instructs Ellis to take Fatima to the forest, but warns his son not to hesitate if she becomes a threat again. A cold piece of advice Ellis silently rejects. Upon arriving at the cabin for the escape, father and son find the place empty. Fatima was tricked by Elgin, who lured her to the basement claiming orders from Ellis. There he reveals his true motivation, stating that the baby exists but doesn't belong to her and that she must remain there for the child's sake. Fatima's horror increases when a sharp pain prevents her from fleeing, and her desperate attempt to escape is blocked by Elgin, who drags her back into the darkness of captivity. Elgin forces Fatima into a secret compartment in the basement, justifying the captivity as a safety measure for the baby. But she realizes he hides dark intentions. Escape attempts are thwarted by Elgin, who insists on a bizarre diet, offering blood extracted from his own veins, which Fatima, overcome by her cravings, ends up drinking. Meanwhile, Boyd and Ellis are forced to suspend the night search when the sheriff's health fails, taking them back to the station. In the safety of the station, Boyd finally confides in his son his ALS diagnosis and imminent loss of mobility, explaining that his silence aimed to protect Ellis from more suffering. He also reveals the trauma experienced in the barn, where demons forced him to watch the brutal death of the diner owner to break him mentally, and fears Fatima's disappearance is an extension of this torture. The conversation is interrupted by noises outside, almost leading Boyd to shoot blindly if not for Ellis's quick intervention. The next morning, Fatima attempts a desperate ambush using a piece of iron she ripped from the bed, but only manages to superficially wound Elgin, who dominates the situation effortlessly. Meanwhile, Sarah bursts into the station with information obtained through the voices in her head, revealing that Fatima's kidnapping is a tactic to sow fear in the town. The revelation shocks Boyd and Ellis, as the disappearance was supposed to be a secret restricted to them, confirming Sarah's connection to events. Victor, aided by Tabitha, recovers memories that only deepen his guilt, as he believes his revelations caused his mother's death. Tabitha's comforting touch triggers a torrent of inexplicable visions, leaving her stunned. The moment is interrupted by news that Julie was found injured in the forest. At the clinic, despite the absence of physical damage, Julie is psychologically shaken, insisting on the truthfulness of her experiences in the ruins, although she can't articulate them to her parents. Victor's despair leads him to grab a giant axe, scaring the residents until explaining he only intends to chop down a tree. Donna, torn between reporting Fatima and preserving memory, decides to support Boyd and convinces him that the focus must be the rescue and fighting the demonic scheme. Ready? They mobilize the town using the newly reopened diner as a meeting point to organize a search party, deflecting questions about Fatima's crime. Boyd gives a speech to the crowd about past victories and the efficacy of talismans to inspire courage and unity against the common enemy, getting enough volunteers to form search pairs. During the operation in the forest, Boyd confides in the deputy his concern for the future of the town given his illness, effectively naming him his successor. The deputy accepts the burden with loyalty, promising to stay by the sheriff's side until the end. Jim takes advantage of Fatima's disappearance to teach Ethan a lesson about control and resilience, using his own guilt as an example of how fear feeds the demons. The lesson is tested when the dead brother's voice appears on the radio, and both, now strengthened, choose to ignore the provocation and move forward. In the search, Elgin manipulates, suggesting that Fatima and the baby might be the key to escape, planting seeds of confusion to cover up his own crime. Victor arrives at the teleportation tree, ready to destroy it with the axe, but is stopped by the appearance of the boy in white, who warns about the tree's vital importance and the residents' need for adaptation. After the figure disappears, Tabitha and Julie, guided by Tabitha's visions of the ghost boy, arrive at the location. Julie finally shares her experience of hearing her mother and Victor in the past. Tabitha reaffirms her promise of protection before following the boy's specter toward new answers. In captivity, Fatima discovers a blocked trapdoor, and at the height of despair, receives a silent visit from the kimono ghost woman. Guided by the boy in white, Tabitha and Julie find the basement entrance where Victor already is, having recovered the memory that this was the last place he saw his mother. Upon trying to comfort him again, Tabitha's touch triggers a new and intense transfer of memories, revealing secrets. Fatima watches with horror the growth of her belly and feels painful internal movements. Cornered in the room, she attempts an escape, and upon failing, opts to give up to stop the ghost's plans, but is interrupted by the appearance of the kimono woman. Terror, or a supernatural force, induces immediate labor. Meanwhile, Ellis's distrust regarding Elgin grows, leading him to share his suspicions with his father. Boyd, with Sarah's help, confronts Elgin and discovers his packed luggage and supply of essentials, confirming he is hiding Fatima. Elgin confesses the pact with the ghost, insisting the baby is the town's salvation, ignoring medical proof that there is no real pregnancy. Boyd orders Elgin to be watched while he prepares for extreme interrogation methods. In the tool shed, Boyd is tormented by the apparition of the deceased pastor, who points out his moral hypocrisy in using violence against Elgin while protecting Fatima from her crimes. Moved by the desperation to save his daughter-in-law and family loyalty, Boyd ignores the accusation and returns to the room with torture tools. The camera fires on its own, revealing a photo of Boyd's old house, which he interprets as a provocation from the ghost, hardening his determination to break Elgin's silence by force. The brutality of the interrogation attracts the officer, who tries to intervene and report Boyd, creating a tense standoff downstairs. Taking advantage of the distraction, Sarah enters the room and, knowing the unbreakable nature of demonic possession, applies her own methods. Her acts result in agonizing screams from Elgin, but she manages to extract Fatima's location. Wasting no time, the group runs to the basement, where the birth is already underway. Upon invading the secret chamber, they find Fatima unharmed, but the entity has already left, taking the baby into the tunnel. Boyd, leaving Fatima under Ellis's care, follows alone through the underground passage, discovering that it connects to the monster's caves. There he witnesses the ghost and the demons, observing the fleshy mass removed from Fatima, transforming into the resurrected form of the smiling monster he had killed previously, revealing the false pregnancy's true purpose. At the same time, Tabitha seeks Jade's help to decipher Victor's mother's messages. The connection between the boy seen in the tunnel and the symbols on the teleportation tree's roots finally becomes clear to Jade. The bottles contain the key. Together, they and Jim decode the numbers on the bottles as a 12-tone musical scale. Jade composes a melody from the codes, feeling an unsettling beauty in the music that emerges, eager to test its power. Cautious of possible traps, they decide to play the melody in the forest under the teleportation tree. When Jade performs the music, ghost children appear visible only to him and Tabitha, while Jim remains oblivious to the vision. Meanwhile, Julie theorizes with Ethan about her time travel experiences in the ruins, considering the possibility of using this phenomenon to alter the past and save lost lives, feeling a compulsion to try again. In the forest, the revelation hits Tabitha and Jade with full force. The shared vision of the children indicates they are reincarnations or spiritual successors of Victor's mother and the doll's owner, Christopher, trapped in a cycle of failed attempts to save the children. Unable to handle the weight of this, Tabitha flees, being followed by Jim, to whom she explains the cyclical reality of their roles in the town's curse before isolating herself to process the shock. Jim, stunned and trying to assimilate the revelation, returns to the trailer, where he is surprised by a vision of Julie covered in blood, begging for help. Before he can react, a mysterious man in a yellow cloak appears blaming Tabitha's excavation in the basement for all the tragedy. Without giving a chance for defense or understanding, the figure cuts Jim's throat, ending thus the third season of From, Science Fiction and Mystery Series of 2022. And I wait for you in the next video. That was summary of full movies. Thanks. It's us.